So welcome, Emily, to Utah Valley University. We got a lot of people behind you guys. Can you tell us what you thought of the movie?
Thank you. I can't hear, but I can see hands.
I know, yeah, it's weird. The
I
phone
can,
distance is so short.
yeah.
Boy, just such a powerful, beautiful, crazy movie. I want to talk. I'm going to ask one question. We've got
Okay.
a line already formed of people who want to ask you questions, and the question I just want to ask is kind of introductory because you made this with Julian, and he obviously is very personal story going on, and I'm just curious about, you've worked on a lot of films and projects all over the world, and I wanted to know whether this was something like you were looking for, this was a project
Mm,
that you had started to be one thing and then turned into another, whether Julian came on board with you right away, or if you met along the road, or how did that genesis sort of occur?
yeah, that's a great question. Julian and I met a decade ago, actually more than a decade ago now. We were desk mates at our first reporting jobs,
Hmm.
and we had become friends. And Julian had gone on to become a writer and journalist and focused really on Indigenous life in North America. And I had started making documentary films and was also doing investigative reporting in newsrooms, covering topics all over the world, from Afghanistan to the Saharan Desert. And I um, had never made anything about my own country. I grew up in a community of Holocaust survivors and their descendants. My own family fled pogroms in what is now Russia and Ukraine. And I, as a kid, had a lot of questions about, why we exact violence on one another, and why the silences that permeate our families after these atrocities happen. And so when news broke in May of 2021 about the potential unmarked graves on the grounds of an Indian residential school, I was, like so many, I was shocked. And uh, I felt this kind of this pull. Um, and my gut was telling me that I had to follow the story. That's kind of always how I end up picking my subject matter, is that I'm looking for stories that haven't been told. And when I see the right one, it just sort of hits. And the first thing that I did, uh, once I decided that I was wanted to do this, was reach out to Julian, and I just sent him a text and said, "Hey, I've been seeing the news, these discoveries of unmarked graves. Would you be open to maybe working on a project together on a doc?" And he needed some time to think about that for obvious reasons that I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
Um, and also, because he was a writer and he's like, do I want to make a documentary? I don't know. So he was giving it some thought. And in the meantime, I went looking for a nation that said they were going to do a search, because it seemed natural to me to follow a narrative in its natural, you know, um, progression of a search. Like it just felt like a natural arc to a story, and that it would lead somewhere. I didn't know where, but somewhere. And I found this article in the Williams Lake Tribune about Chief Willie Sellers in the Williams Lake First Nation in British Columbia. I'd never even been to BC, even though I'm Canadian.
Right.
And of course, we were never taught about the residential schools in growing up. So I really didn't know about them until I became a journalist and a filmmaker. So anyways, I wrote a cold email to Chief Willie Sellers, and he called me back that same afternoon, and he said, the creator has always had great timing. Just yesterday, our council said we need someone to document this search. So it was really Willie and council that had decided that they wanted this, which is, a very rare thing for an indigenous community to want after everything to bring in an outsider to follow something so intimate and difficult. So I met with council on Zoom. I booked flights to Williams Lake. I found a cinematographer to shoot with me, Chris Lamarca, and I waited to hear from Julian. And it was a couple weeks later that he called me back and said, "I've given it a lot of thought, and I'm open to working on something with you." And I said, "That's great. I'm going to be following a search at a school called St. Joseph's Mission near a town called Williams Lake in British Columbia." And as you can imagine, he went silent um, and said, "That's the school my family went to and where I had heard my father was born and found in like a dumpster nearby."
Mm.
And that's all he had ever known. And it was just this rumor, and he didn't even know that his father was born at the school. So anyways, out of 139 Indian residential schools in Canada, I happened to choose the one where, my friend um, family attended and where his father was born. Um, so it was kind of a remarkable beginning and fated beginning. And from there, we went to Williams Lake and started following the search and following Rick and Charlene and Willie. But we really didn't start entering Julian's story until about a year in. So that came later, and that was definitely a turn. Like we were on a path, and I always knew that if, that scene in the barn with Charlene and Julian, that was the only thing we shot really of him in that first year. And that was shot in the first 2 weeks. And Charlene had just said, "Come to the barn and bring your camera and bring Julian." And I said, "Okay," not knowing what was going to happen. And she started performing the ceremony on him and kind of calling on him to help tell the story. And I think it was this really kinetic moment, and it felt kind of like the world broke open, and we were in this place where all the kids, had written messages on the wall and counted down the days till they could go home. And she was, calling on the ancestors. It was just a really, um, yeah, a really potent moment. And I think in that moment, I knew that should Julian choose to be in the film at some point, that it would be, you know, remarkable. But only he could make that decision. So, and he, needed some time to do that.
So is Charlene the investigator? That's Julian's aunt then,
Yeah.
right? What a crazy,
Yeah,
crazy.
which he didn't know.
Yeah.
Like she's not his like first aunt,
Right.
but they're in the Archie
Yeah,
family,
sure.
and she
Yeah.
is his aunt. But so when I chose her as a character before Julian got there, I was there for a week, and I had started following her, and I just remember telling her that Julian was coming to join me and direct with me. And I just remember her looking at me and like writing something down and not saying a word, but like she already knew what was going to unfold.
Mm.
And she already knew his part of his father's story. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Incredible. Well, the barn cinematography is fantastic. And with that, I'm going to turn you over to these people, these students. So come on out. Thank you so much, and beautiful film.
Thank you.
And are you in Toronto now or New York? Or
No, I live in Brooklyn.
yeah, of course you are. You're a documentary filmmaker. That's where all documentary filmmakers live. And I'm sorry for keeping you up so late tonight. I really appreciate you.
Totally fine. Thanks so much for watching the film, and I'm happy to be chatting with you guys.
Right.
Hi, Emily. My name's Rye. First of all, I wanted to say this is such like a beautiful, powerful film. I've never seen a documentary that feels like a narrative film almost in that way. Like it was such a great film. My question is, I know in interviews you've talked about how you had a lot of time to get to know Rick and help him feel comfortable in front of the camera so that he could open up, and especially at the Vatican, he felt like the camera was like a support to him at that point. I was wondering, how do you make people who you've had less time with or who are in a group setting feel as comfortable to share in front of the camera?
Mm, thank you for that question, and for paying attention to any interviews I've done in the past. Yeah, I think that one of the most important skills in documentary, and I think in journalism too, is the ability to create space for people, and to make them feel safe. And I think it comes down to very basic human relationships. It's not about necessarily what you say or what you do with the camera, but the way that you show up. And I think it's coming from a pretty heart open place, and building trust over time. And I think, when you have some people who already trust you, it's easier for others to say, okay, well, the chief trusts her and Charlene trusts her. And, so people who we were with in shorter periods could lean on that. And also, Julian's involvement with the film as well, that he was from the community and he was also, eventually telling his story, I think also gave people like a feeling of trust. But I think very fundamentally, it's about how you treat people. And, we really wanted, there's a very problematic history of how Native people and Native stories have been treated in documentary and in cinema at large. The first so-called documentary was Nanook of the North, and it kind of portrayed a uh, a kind of rudimentary version of life, a primitive version of life that, these people were incapable of interacting with modern technology, which wasn't the case. And, the filmmaker had fathered children and then kind of left. And in fiction, all you have to do is look at the Westerns in which Indigenous people were most often seen at the end of the barrel of a gun. And so when we approached this film, we understood that it was so important that the way we interacted people with people was reciprocal. And so we made the choice to live in community. I mean, back and forth, but really live in community for 2.5 years. We shot 160 days, attended community events, did little things for people like picking um, Chief Willie's kids up from hockey practice, and I would watch American Idol with Rick at night, which was his favorite show. And it was just about like showing up and spending time. And trying to, you can never really, completely eliminate the power dynamic of someone who's holding the camera and someone who's in front of it. But you can try to wield the camera in a way that tells people that they matter and that this is like their space to um, tell their story or live their story in front of the camera, and that you're there to like try to do it as beautifully and thoughtfully as possible.
Well, thank you so much. That was really important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Taya. My question
Um,
my question is, what was the response from the Catholic community after the release of the film, and how would it inspire you in how you tell a story like this again?
mm, uh, that's a really good question. I think I would kind of put it in two categories. There's the response of the Catholic Church as an institution, and then the response of Catholics writ large. And when it comes to the institution, they never responded to the film. And much like, the Pope's apology, um, it was pretty, their response to survivors was pretty thin. Like it didn't go like in terms of any sort of real reparations or compensation or releasing their records. They really didn't do that, and came up pretty short on that end, uh, which surprised no one. But I will say that so many Catholics and Catholic communities, we've brought the film to church communities, people of faith, people who have just come to the film who were raised Catholic, who have responded incredibly to it, and were able to be really thoughtful and critical about the wrongdoings of the institution, but also, you know, honor the faith. And I think we really wanted to delicately portray in the film that many people in this community, Catholicism and Christianity have become a part of their lives, and it is now their practice. And it's possible to have faith in that and also reject the wrongdoing of the institution and want to hold them to account. And it was important for us, like through Rick's story, to really show the contours of that and the tension between those two things. And of course Rick's goes beyond that to his own parentage, being born of a priest who raped his mother. He's carrying it in his literal DNA, and he's still practicing the faith, but he's also, angry. And um, that's a really interesting tension, and we wanted to capture the complexity of that. But we were, yeah, really amazed by the number of Catholics who have said, like, I had no idea, and what can we do now? How do we think about this? How do we re-engage? And a lot of victims who said I was, abused by a Catholic priest. And I think we had a lot of people share their stories of abuse across the board, but many in the Catholic faith. Um, so I think that I hope that answers the Catholicism question. Well, can you remind me the second question?
Um, it was how would their responses, like how would it inspire you and for you to tell another story like this again?
The response of the
Yeah, like
specifically the Catholic Church.
or just like the religious community, like how they responded to a deep story like this. How would it inspire you to tell another story?
I think that when I approach um, a story, a subject matter, I think I always know that there's potential for impact, but really what I'm focused on is A, like what is the truth?
Yeah.
And B, how do we best portray the truth, and how do we tell the most compelling story possible that transports people into this world, and gets at, not just the capital T truth, but the emotional truth and the spiritual truth. And my hope is always that people will make of that what they will, and maybe they'll respond, like the White House did, and show the film in the Indian Treaty Room and be part of the movement to have Joe Biden apologize and all of that. And sometimes they'll respond like the Catholic Church. But I think it's an interesting role of the artist and journalist to not necessarily be an advocate, like aiming for a particular
Mm.
response, but rather to hold a mirror up, and use craft to emotionally connect people to, um, an unfamiliar setting and story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lola. Taya kind of asked my question a little bit, but I love Taya, so it's okay. Um, I was wondering, there's something so painful to witness, whether it's ethnic cleansing, genocide, just plain murder. You were able to portray it in such a deeply powerful way. I was wondering, beyond distribution, but also, what do you feel like the pitfalls and fears of retribution would be about maybe more like in for future projects if you go somewhere more dangerous or anything like that? Because we do, America very much avoids speaking of genocide. And so I felt like this film was very powerful, but genocide is a hot topic issue, especially in 2025. I was wondering what, I don't know, what you'd want to do going forward and how you would use your creativity and privilege to be able to make more films.
Yeah, I think that I particularly have been drawn to stories of, human atrocity, and people surviving those atrocities for, the reasons I shared about the community I grew up in. And so that has been kind of a through line through my work. And I will just continue to pursue it. Unafraid. I'm currently working on an investigation, not a doc, but an investigation, um, in Gaza, and for the New York Times. So, that's what I'm, you know, it's a really, you're right, it's a really impossible and painful moment. And I think Sugarcane resonates, especially now for that reason. And I think it continues to be my calling to, try to help people understand what's happening. And something about danger. I guess I take calculated risks. Like I try to be thoughtful and not, throw myself into a situation without taking precaution, but I also am willing to, come up against the line to do something that feels worthy of that.
Well, I'm really excited to see the kind of creativity and passion you'll bring to that story because it's very important to hear. So that makes me happy to hear. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Emily. My name's Eli. Very powerful film. Really appreciated just the film in general. My question has to do with the visual storytelling aspect of it, the show and don't tell. I really like the use of the silence in those moments of the conversations between the subjects, like Ed and Rick. My question is, what inspired you to put that all together in the final edit of the film? Just the use of those silent moments, because I think that's just very powerful.
Yeah, it's a great question. It was totally fundamental to the way we edited the film. Um, the truth of these communities, it's not only that, the Canadian government, doesn't want to talk about this, or the American government, or the church. It's that, you know, within Indigenous communities, people are so traumatized and were silenced for so long that they turned that silence on themselves. And so, how do you capture what's not said? That was kind of, one of the questions. And I think particularly in Julian's relationship with his grandmother, with his cat, that was the big thing that we needed to capture, is what she wasn't able to say. And so visually, so that was like a fundamental idea for us. And visually, the way that I shot those moments with Julian's grandmother was to linger, and not to try to, cover the scene and get different angles and all of that, but to really follow her energy. And I knew I had been around her enough to know that like the thumb twiddling was um what she did when she was uncomfortable or didn't want to answer. And so I knew in that scene, when Julian pushed a little farther and said, "What other things happened there?" um I knew to move the camera down to her thumbs. And so what that allowed for in the edit was space, for something to be happening and for you to learn something emotionally about what she was going through without us needing to say it. Um, I think another place we created that sort of space, besides, like moments with Rick as well, was in those little interludes, where we felt the audience needed a breath to process what had happened, and also to like see life continuing. And each of those little interludes that had like 3 or 4 shots, we were was a different kind of thematic message. So, for example, there's like the winter interludes with the shot of the snow coming down, and um, the cow in the middle of it, of the mission, um, and little kids on the sled. And we were trying to evoke the kind of, you know, the whitewashing of the truth, the colonial cow like standing in the way, um, the way that the kids were so isolated in this kind of freezing environment, and the way that they still manage to play, and they still do. And there's another interlude with a kind of Western theme. We've always thought of this film as kind of a reverse Western. And we have that kind of interlude where you see, um, a kind of deer in front of this like big industrial wood, plant, and logging plant rather. And then you see like an indigenous cowboy who's, you know, seems pretty down on his luck, like walking past a decrepit motel. And you see like a mural of a cowboy on so I think in those moments when we created space, it was important for those to kind of be subliminal messaging about what this world is, and what the iconographies are of the world, as well as, capturing the silences between characters, and themselves.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question.
Duane, you first or me?
Yep, hold on just a sec. I have to deal with a little issue. I'm going to mute myself for a second. Sorry, dealing with a little technical issue. Please come on. Thank you. Maybe you heard that, but I don't know.
I didn't hear anything.
Hello, I'm Joshua.
Hey,
First,
Joshua.
I just want to say it was such a good movie. I was reading an interview before this from you about this movie, and you mentioned that you worked with, I believe it was the Catalyst program for this film.
Yeah.
I was curious how you came to like start working with them and what the process was like working with them.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm like I'm impressed that you so many of you were reading interviews. Catalyst is for those who don't know, a lab at Sundance. It's a program, it's an amazing program where they train you for like 3 months in how to pitch your film. And that includes, you know, putting together a deck and a budget, and then kind of coming up with this TED Talk, 15-minute TED Talk to kind of pitch your story. And then they bring you to the Sundance Resort, and they bring in all of these investors and grant makers, and there are, you know, a few fiction, there are like 5 fiction films and 5 docs. You present, and then you sit down with, you know, funders, and they decide whether they want to give you money. And it was a totally pivotal and essential part of our process, because not only was it a great learning experience of, you know, this was my first feature. I'd come from the journalism world. I was making docs in that context where I didn't need to raise money. There was just already a budget. So I never had to pitch in this way. So I think we all learned so much from it. We really honed in on telling the story about the story. And then we raised the majority of the money for the film. It was a $1.7 million budget, and we raised about 70% of that in grants. And a good portion of that was from the Catalyst program. So yeah, that was like, and it was an incredible experience. And we were really lucky to get into the program, because it was pretty fundamental.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Emily. I'm Jake.
Hey, Jake.
So I was curious if you could talk about the process of assembling the movie and whether that's mostly done in the editing room, or if, as you're making the film, you have a framework that you're trying to film for.
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, I think that two things were kind of happening concurrently. It started with, from the get-go, Julian and I were just constantly talking about the story and what we were seeing and who we were following and what their arcs might be, and what, you know, what points might be moments for each of our characters, knowing what they were after. And so over the course of, you know, 2.5 years, we had really honed in on what we wanted the film to feel like, what we wanted it to say, the themes, what the character beats were. And then you enter the edit, and you're like, how do you translate all those ideas and vision into, um, you know, a rhythm that works? And we had two incredible editors, Nathan Panwar and Maya Daisy Hawk. And with them, we started by, you know, watching all of the footage. And, you know, there's sometimes a difference between what feels really good in the moment and what really like works on camera. And then some things will work will work in the edit, but don't work initially. So, and they need to be put in context. And so we started with a 5.5 hour cut. And we had a kind of, I made all these little cue cards of every scene, like every scene that we were considering, color coded by character. And I also had an Excel spreadsheet and a Google Doc and different ways of thinking about and organizing character beats and events and footage. And after we had marked up all these selects, and got this 5.5 hour cut, and then Maya came in and she took a totally different approach, which was like we had kind of kept trying to like whittle down and whittle down, and she was looking for the tone of the edit, um, which was a really kind of amazing thing to watch her do. So, for example, the first thing she sent us, um, was that opening little scene of Willie running up the stairs, and doing that interview. And I would have never instinctually been like, that's the opening moment of the film. But what she was showing us is propulsion and how to get people to lean in and be like, what's happening? Why is this guy running? Why is he stressed? Like you can feel his kind of, angst. Like it was a really cool lesson in, how to create, um, the feeling of the film. And the other thing she sent us, the kind of next thing she sent us was the title sequence, because we had been saying to her like these are people and characters worthy of epic storytelling and the big screen, and these stories don't get told. And she was like, well, maybe they deserve an opening sequence. And in the first go around, not all the shots were right, but the concept was right and the feeling was right. And so it was about kind of, um, yeah, turning the knobs and trying to calibrate, you know, like how much information people could handle, how often to drip it, um, how much time you could spend with one character before you got bored or before you lost track of the other characters. It was really a game of we just had to kind of try everything to see how it worked. And eventually, I think we created a film that felt totally in line with our initial vision, but I never could have told you how to get there at the beginning. It took so much experimentation, and there were times where we were like, this is never going to work. We can't weave four characters and an investigation and nod to all these themes, and no one understands it. And we were getting feedback that, yeah, no one could track the characters and didn't know what was going on. And so it took a real feat of a year and a half edit, to get there.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your insight.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name's Colin. Um,
Colin.
I was wondering how you approach sound on set and like how you get such good crisp sound and like what your process is for music during like post-production.
Yeah, great question. So Chris and I did all the sound, mostly when we were shooting two camera. Chris ran lavs through his camera. And if there were more people, I would run a couple to mine. And then when I was shooting solo, I would run lavs, and right into the camera. So everybody was on like a little mic, that was under their clothes, usually like taped here. And we would do that at the beginning of the day, and they would just be wearing them the whole time to the point where they all forgot about them entirely, which was great because then we could really capture things that felt more raw and, in the moment. Um, and that was it. So all of it was already, and then we both had directional mics on our cameras. But we didn't do anything outside of that for, shooting the scenes. What we did do was have an incredible sound team, and I'll speak to our composer in a second, but our sound team, this woman named Andrea Bella, traveled to Williams Lake, and recorded sounds of, after she had the cut. And we had recorded our own version of that, but she went and recorded like every bird in every location. And, we had spoken to her again about how, different we wanted the sound to really like speak to particular moments. Like the sound of a crow is like a foreshadowing of death. And, um, an owl, that it was kind of like these are the sounds that tell us something that an insider to the world would know. And she went and recorded all of these sounds, and then we had this incredible sound edit where we were really like thoughtful about what sounds to bring out and where to place things. And um Julian one day sent me and Kellen, my producing partner on the film, uh, this artist named Molly Obamsawin, and he sent us her like jazz album, and he was like, "This is who should compose the music for the film." And we're like, "She's amazing. Has she ever done a documentary? And like, can she do other stuff other than jazz?" And he was like, "Let's find out." And she hadn't really, but she's so talented and really understood what we were doing. And we threw a lot of, again, ideas at her, much like our editors, of like, we wanted to have both a Western sound but also evoke like the sounds of the Catholic Church. And we want each of the characters to have a theme that like changes over time, and also pulls on, traditional songs of the community. And she just blew us away. Yeah, she just kind of went with it and would send us things, and we would be like, "This is amazing," or "Could we try it this way or tweak this in a little way?" But for the most part, she was just kind of just got it. And yeah, she's really amazing. And something that's interesting is that her aunt is Alanis Obamsawin, who is a very famous Canadian documentarian. Um, so she comes from a line of storytellers.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Hi, Emily. My name is Paola. My question is, how do you manage to stay grounded and focused considering the like heavy emotional topics you work with?
Mm, that's a really good question. I, yeah, I think it's an ongoing question. And I think that there are a couple things. One is that I find the work itself deeply fulfilling, and I always find that in kind of the darkest of moments is also where you see the the most extraordinary humanity and love and resilience, and feeling a part of helping tell the story or help people move forward in that, or holding space for them, just gives me like a deep sense of fulfillment and a way to make sense of this chaotic and sometimes broken world. Um, and sometimes I feel in my, normal life, I struggle more to deal with, what's going on in the world, because I feel so, like so many of us, sort of helpless to it. So when I'm working and in service of something, it's actually somewhat helpful. And I do therapy, and I have wonderful friends and community, and I try to also um, fill my cup when I know I need to, because in order to give so much life force you have to take care of yourself. And so, in the period since Sugarcane, I haven't started shooting another doc yet. I will, but I've been working on a book, and just writing and giving myself a minute to breathe, which I think is really important in order to do like the best work and also to show up for people in the right way. Uh, yeah, I think that kind of self-awareness and also reflecting, like, so important to think about, what went right, what went wrong, how to grow from it, how to do better in certain ways. Uh, so yeah, that's a bit of a jumbled answer, but that is my
I
answer.
appreciate it. Thank you, and thank you for all the important work you do.
Thank you.
Hey, Emily, we've got 3 more questions. Is that cool with you? You
Yep,
good? Holding
let's
it
bring them
strong?
on.
Yeah, great.
Hello, my name is Ephraim.
Hey, Ephraim.
In this and in other stuff we had to watch to prep for this,
Mm,
you do a very good job, it seems, of getting people to feel comfortable enough to share stuff that's going on in their lives.
mm,
Can you tell us a bit about, I think a lot of us are going to be in multimedia or stuff that will involve talking to people and interviewing people and stuff like that. Can you tell us a bit about the things you've done in your career, and especially in this, to get people in a space where they feel comfortable enough to open up, like the fundamentals of that as an interview?
yeah. Yeah, I spoke to this a little earlier, so I'll try to come up with something new to say about it. I think that, again, like, just to cover it again, reciprocity, heart open, kindness, time, building trust, through, showing up and listening and being, upfront and clear about what you're doing and how you're doing it, I think is really important. Um, I've been in other really delicate situations. For example, I was doing a short doc on this triple murder of 3 Muslim students in Chapel Hill. Um, by their white neighbor. And the question was, was it a hate crime? And I spent a lot of time with the family, in a very vulnerable time for them while the court case was unfolding. And it was about spending Ramadan with them and not just shooting, but sitting and talking and hanging out and um, yeah, it's such a funny thing. It's like it's just human relationships. It's about connecting, and really listening, like really taking in what people are saying and showing them that you've heard what they said by, giving them a thoughtful follow-up. Like, oh, that's so interesting that you said this. Like, how did that feel in that moment? And kind of making things kind of open-ended. And I think it's also about, um, in that same vein of listening, like picking up on people's, like, the way they react to things and their energy and paying like really a good attention to what makes them squirm and what makes them feel at ease, and thinking about like what moment to come up against that line and when they might be ready for it. And I'll give an example of a time that went wrong, which is actually the first shoot day with Rick. we had met, he's on the council, and so we had met when I met with the council, and I just like he was telling me all sorts of stories, and I just knew that he was going to be a character. And I also had heard from the chief that he had a particularly difficult past, and that there was like a secret that he was keeping that some people kind of knew about, but it was a rumor and all these things. So we did the only sit down interview that we ever did for Sugarcane with Rick. And we went all the way there. He told us like his entire story, and he had a really bad reaction to doing that because he felt like he didn't know us well enough yet, and he felt embarrassed about what he had shared and all of these things, and he actually pulled out of participating after that. And we just said, you know, first of all, we're so sorry that this is how this went for you, and um, we don't need to use any of it. You don't need to be in the film at all, but like we would love to just take you to lunch and spend some time. And over time, just eating meals with him, getting to know him, you know, I started filming him doing like menial tasks and, cleaning the church or mowing the grass. And over time, we were able to really build trust and a relationship to the point where, like, I was his kind of caretaker to go to Rome, and his wife, Anna, trusted me to, like, take care of this 77-year-old man with a heart condition um, on a trip, across the world. And that was a testament to a lot of effort and thoughtfulness into how to correct course and how to really earn his trust, and not demand it.
It takes time, is what you're saying. No matter what, it takes time. You gotta build rapport.
Yeah, you have to build rapport, and you have to show people who you are, to some extent, you know. Uh, yeah, I think it really is about connection.
Well, thank you. I think that's very useful.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's John.
Hey,
Um,
Jen.
and I'm going into video editing, and so I actually wanted to ask, earlier you mentioned that it took you like a year and a half, and it was a really difficult edit to like get all the characters together, keep it not confusing, and to help like communicate your ideas. I was just curious, like what like in particular was hard about the editing process, like the specifics more so, if you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on for days about things that were hard, but I'll choose a few. One is that we just had so much footage. It's like 160 days of footage, much of that to camera. We had so many storylines, and it was really hard to let go of any of them for a very long time. And I think what I learned through the process was, how to let go of things and how to try to cut to the core of what the story is. And at some point we had to strip the whole thing down and just like start with the bare bones again because we just like couldn't figure out what was and wasn't working. Um, so that was really interesting. I think another another difficulty was figuring out how to make individual scenes um, feel like something, as opposed to kind of a series of selects of shots and things happening, like how to actually build tension within those scenes, and how to create enough space between dialogue and yeah, just again, like that idea of creating silences and spaces, that was really tricky. Um, I mentioned this earlier, but there was so much information, particularly in the investigation, and we could only choose to focus in on like a few pieces because we found when we showed people rough cuts that they just couldn't handle it. Like we really wanted to talk about how there was like, forced labor. The children were all forced to labor, and the priests were essentially starving the kids and making money off of them because they sold the goods that they made, uh, and we couldn't include it. We just like didn't have the space to do it, and I think that was really I think that was really difficult figuring out, okay, like what is the most essential information, and how much can an audience handle, how much can they digest, and then I think character wise, figuring out how to make the Julian character work was a huge challenge for us, because he was just a different kind of character. He was kind of a conduit. He was like a way into to his father's story. He was kind of, in the Western, like a stranger comes to town, and we just didn't know how big of a role he should play. And, you know, I think once we figured out that when he wasn't working, it was when we had him alone for like half the film, and then his dad joined him like halfway through. And when we figured out that he and his dad had to be together from the beginning and set off together, that cracked it. But it took us a while to get there of like, why isn't Julian like working in the way the other characters are? And it's because the tension and stakes were with his dad, and yeah, so many, many challenges, but those were a few.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's super helpful. Yeah. So thank you. And also thanks for the film. It was amazing.
Thank you.
Hi, Emily. I'm Jeff. I'm the last question, so thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jeff.
You covered some incredible tough subjects in your career. When it came to Sugarcane, did working on a story tied to a religious institution make the process any more challenging for you?
Yeah, I think the hardest part of it was that when we went to the Vatican to follow Rick's story, they just did not want us there. And we were kind of banned from everything and kept sneaking in to all the events to film Rick, and got in more and more trouble along the way. And then I actually had to sneak into the Vatican. That scene with Rick that I filmed on my phone, I like hid under a bus and skirted the Vatican guard to get that scene. So I think it was a really interesting moment of where there was this, religious institution who was actively trying to block us. And I hadn't experienced that in particular. So yeah, but we found ways around it physically and yeah, literally and figuratively. Yeah, so I think it's interesting. We also got the most pushback we got was from Catholics, particularly like a group of denialists who just kept coming after the film and like sending letters to to the Academy and to Sundance, and being like, it's all a sham and it's all made up. And so that was also really challenging at first because it was hurtful, to Julian, to everyone in the film. And figuring out how to really like ignore it and let it go was also something we had to figure out as a team. But I'd do it again.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, this has been a great night. We give her a big.
Uh,
I want to ask two last favors.
Yeah.
One is first to have you look at the camera and let me just take a screenshot to use as a thumbnail for our little
Okay.
thing, because otherwise, so one, two, three, and then lovely, and then I love getting a picture of just all of our guys here with our big screen and you. Would you mind doing a little group picture like that?
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much. Everyone come on down. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Thank you. And someone in the front. And bring it into the middle. And get them in the chair too, because I can't see the wide. Well, that's awesome. I don't think it's very yeah. I don't sing so high today. I know. All right, everyone who's on the sites, get in there, squeeze in there. Emily, thank you so much. 1, 2, 3, smile, everyone. Yay. Yay. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for all the thoughtful questions and for watching the film.
Have a great night. Get some sleep. Thank you for staying up late with us.
I will. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.